If you rewind the clock just like a year or two, we were basically all promised this sci-fi utopia of workplace productivity.
Universally promised. It was everywhere.
Right. Like every tech publication, every keynote speaker, every vendor pitch was telling us that handing generative AI tools to our workforce would unlock, well, something like 10x output.
That was the narrative, yeah.
Yeah, the idea was that we'd be transitioning to shorter work weeks. We'd seamlessly crush our quarterly goals.
Just sitting back while the algorithms handled all the heavy lifting of knowledge work.
Exactly. But, if you walk through a modern office today, or honestly, if you just look at your own calendar in your inbox, that hasn't materialized at all.
No, it really hasn't.
The workload hasn't magically disappeared. For most people, it actually feels heavier.
It is the defining corporate paradox of this decade, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we are deploying computationally staggering technology. At a scale we've literally never seen before. We have these neural networks with trillions of parameters, and they're accessible to almost every white-collar worker on Earth.
Which is wild to think about.
It is. Yet, when economists look at the macro-level data, the revolution is it's stubbornly absent.
The needle isn't moving.
The needle simply isn't moving in the way the underlying power of the technology suggests it should.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Yeah. Because that disconnect is exactly the mission of this deep dive today.
Absolutely.
We are looking at a meticulously researched new article by Dr. Jonathan Westover. It's titled, "Why GenAI Productivity Gains Remain Elusive."
Such an important piece of research.
It really is. And our objective here is to dissect why simply buying a bunch of AI licenses and just handing them to your team is a failing strategy.
A completely failing strategy.
Now, we're going to expose the hidden organizational costs of AI adoption and, more importantly, give you a research-backed framework for actually capturing the value of this technology.
Because the value is there.
Exactly. Whether you are leading a global enterprise division or, you're just trying to figure out why your own daily use of AI feels so chaotic, this research challenges all the conventional wisdom.
And that conventional wisdom relies entirely on vendor marketing.
Oh, for sure.
Which naturally focuses on the theoretical capability of the model in a total vacuum.
Right, like under perfect conditions.
Exactly. But this research forces us to look at the structural, the organizational, and honestly, the deeply psychological realities of how human beings actually integrate technology into complex workflows.
Yeah, the way I am conceptualizing the current state of enterprise AI adoption after reading this, it's like handing out industrial-grade chainsaws to a team of carpenters who have only ever used hand saws.
Oh, that is a great analogy.
Right. But you don't give them blueprints. You don't give them safety training.
You don't coordinate who is doing what.
Exactly. You don't say who is cutting the framing and who is cutting the drywall. You just turn it on and say, look how fast this blade spins, and walk away.
Expecting a perfectly built house by Friday.
Yes, which is insane.
That analogy perfectly highlights the core failure of the deployment strategy right now.
How so?
Well, you've introduced a tool that hyper-accelerates a really specific, localized action. Cutting a piece of wood or generating a block of text or code.
Right, it does the one thing really fast.
Exactly. But constructing a house is not merely an aggregation of cut wood.
Obviously not.
It requires architectural sequencing, it requires load-bearing calculations, and just massive interpersonal coordination.
You have to talk to each other.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the failure to understand that distinction is exactly why the economic expectations have so violently detached from reality.
So let's talk about those expectations, actually.
Yeah.
Because the paper highlights some staggering numbers.
The McKinsey estimate.
Yes. McKinsey put out an estimate suggesting that generative AI could create between $2.6 trillion and $4.4 trillion in potential annual value.
Across global business functions.
Right. When you hear a projection measured in the trillions, you naturally assume the entire foundation of the global economy is about to shift overnight.
Which makes the actual data so sobering.
The Bureau of Labor Statistics data.
Yeah, from early 2025. The paper anchors its whole argument with the statistic.
Which is?
Despite the billions of dollars flowing into AI infrastructure and enterprise software licenses, non-farm productivity growth in the United States has averaged just 2.1% annually over the last 7 years.
2.1%? That doesn't sound like an economic revolution.
It isn't, not even close.
Wow.
You want to know the historical average for non-farm productivity growth in the U.S. from 1947 all the way to 2026.
What is it?
Exactly 2.1%.
Wait, really? It's identical.
Identical. The most aggressive technology deployment in modern history has not altered the historical baseline by a single tenth of a point.
That's mind-blowing.
And the short-term data is actually even more alarming. In the first quarter of 2025, when AI adoption was at a fever pitch, productivity increased by only 0.3%.
Okay, I have to push back on this, or at least play devil's advocate for a second.
Go for it.
If I look at my own workflow, or the workflows of people listening right now, I know for a fact that AI is making certain things faster.
Sure.
Like, I use it to synthesize 50-page PDFs into actionable summaries. I use it to draft initial structures for complex emails.
Right, individual tasks.
Yeah, and the paper itself even cites that famous study. The one that demonstrated professionals doing writing tasks with 37% faster, and the quality was graded 18% higher.
Yes, the Nguyen Zhang study.
Exactly. So if individuals are working 37% faster, how does the macroeconomic data completely ignore that? The math, it doesn't seem to add up.
Well, the math adds up perfectly when you apply Peter Drucker's framework for measuring knowledge work.
Okay, remind me of that framework.
The paper uses it to dissect this exact illusion. Drucker established decades ago that knowledge work cannot be measured using industrial-era metrics.
Meaning you can't just count the output.
Exactly. You can't just count the number of words generated or emails sent as if they were physical widgets rolling off an assembly line.
Because generating more emails doesn't necessarily mean you generated more value.
Often it means the exact opposite. You're just creating noise.
Right, right.
And this is where the paper introduces the critical distinction between apparent productivity and realized productivity.
Apparent versus realized. Okay, break that down for me.
Saving 15 minutes drafting a memo. That is apparent productivity. The individual task was accelerated.
Okay.
But realized productivity, which is the metric that actually moves the BLS data in a company's bottom line,
No.
that demands that those saved 15 minutes are converted into net new valuable output, or that the organization can maintain its previous output while strategically reducing headcount or hours worked.
Oh, I see. So to use a network engineering analogy,
I love analogies. Let's hear it.
it's like upgrading the local processor on your laptop to a massively powerful chip. You think you are going to work blazing fast, but you are still connected to the company server via a slow, laggy network connection.
Oh, absolutely.
So your local processor completes its calculation in a millisecond, but then it just sits there, completely idle, waiting for the network to catch up.
Exactly. The local speed upgrade didn't change the system-wide completion time at all.
That makes total sense.
It's a brilliant way to conceptualize it. The local processor is the individual employee equipped with AI. The network connection is the organizational workflow.
And when that local processor sits idle,
Human psychology takes over.
Yeah.
We don't just sit perfectly still. We fall victim to Parkinson's law.
Parkinson's law. That's the principle that work expands to fill the time available for its completion, right?
Yes, exactly.
But the paper argues it's actually worse than just Parkinson's law. We aren't just passively wasting the saved time staring at the wall.
No, we are actively engaging in behaviors that degrade the system.
Right. The research points out that the time saved by AI is frequently absorbed by expanding quality standards and adding paranoid verification steps.
Because the user knows the AI is prone to hallucination.
Yeah, it makes up facts.
So they spend the 15 minutes they just saved painstakingly fact-checking the output against the original source documents.
Or they spend the time endlessly tweaking the stylistic formatting of the AI's response, trying to make it sound slightly more, human.
Yes. The time vanishes into this abyss of micro-adjustments that add zero strategic value to the final deliverable.
Which transitions us perfectly into the phenomenon the research identifies as the dark side of localized AI deployment.
It gets pretty dark.
It really does.
Yeah.
Because if that time isn't being used to create strategic value, what is it creating?
The answer is my absolute favorite piece of terminology from this entire research.
Oh, I know what you're going to say.
Workslop.
Yes, workslop. It is such a viscerally accurate term.
It really is. Workslop refers to AI-generated content that fulfills the technical parameters of a prompt, like it hits the word count, it uses the requested keywords.
It formats it as a bulleted list.
Exactly. But it is utterly devoid of genuine insight, strategic nuance, or original thought.
It is the algorithmic equivalent of empty calories.
Yes. And we see this everywhere now.
Oh, constantly. It's that B2B marketing blog post that opens with, "In today's fast-paced digital landscape, it is more important than ever to delve into a rich tapestry of solutions."
Ugh, I read that exact sentence yesterday.
Right, it sounds grammatically flawless, but it communicates absolutely nothing about the actual product or the customer's real-world pain points.
Nothing at all.
But let me challenge the economic impact of this for a second.
Sure.
If an employee uses AI to instantly generate a piece of work slop to satisfy a minor administrative requirement, isn't that just, I don't know, a victimless crime?
A victimless crime.
Yeah, like it's fluff, sure, but it gets a box checked. Why does the paper argue this is actively destroying organizational value?
Because organizations are highly interdependent ecosystems. The piece of work slop doesn't exist in a vacuum. It flows downstream.
Downstream processing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the downstream processing costs of work slop frequently eclipse the upstream time savings.
Okay, trace a specific example of that for me.
Let's imagine a product marketing team. They use AI to rapidly generate 50 new campaign assets in a single afternoon.
Okay. Upstream, the dashboard shows incredible apparent productivity.
The marketing director's thrilled. They hit their quarterly asset quota in a week.
Wow, they look like heroes.
But the assets are work slop. They lack deep market context.
Right.
So those assets are then pushed downstream to the sales and development representatives, and they use them to contact potential enterprise clients.
Oh, I see where this is going.
The clients read this generic hollow messaging and immediately recognize it as automated fluff.
Their skepticism spikes.
Exactly. They feel disrespected by the lack of personalization. So now, when the sales rep finally gets the client on the phone, they start from a position of massive trust deficit.
Ah. The sales rep now has to spend an extra 45 minutes on that call, aggressively rebuilding trust,
Yeah.
answering fundamental product questions that a thoughtfully designed campaign would have addressed in the first place.
And trying to convince the client that their company isn't just running a generic spam operation.
Wow. So the time the marketing department saved is paid for by the sales department with a massive penalty attached.
The Herman Miller case study in the text illustrates this dynamic so well, and in a physical design context, which is fascinating.
I am so glad we are digging into this one.
Yeah.
Because Herman Miller is legendary for their meticulous, human-centric ergonomic design.
Absolutely.
You don't buy a Herman Miller chair for the aesthetic alone. You buy it for the philosophy behind the engineering.
Right.
And according to the paper, they actually encourage their industrial designers to use GenAI for rapid ideation and early-stage concept development.
And initially, it looked like a massive success. The velocity of concept generation exploded.
They were churning out ideas.
Designers were able to prompt the AI and generate dozens of visually stunning photorealistic chair concepts in hours instead of weeks.
But the paper notes that the AI fundamentally misunderstood the assignment.
Completely.
Like it could perfectly mimic the visual vernacular of Herman Miller, the sleek lines, the specific use of mesh and molded polymer.
But the concepts were structurally and ergonomically hollow.
Because the AI doesn't know what a spine is.
Exactly. A diffusion model doesn't understand physics, spinal alignment, or manufacturing constraints.
Right.
It only understands the statistical distribution of pixels in its training data. It knows that a Herman Miller chair usually has a curve in a certain place, but it has zero conceptual model of why that curve exists.
To support the lumbar spine.
Right.
So when the designers took these hyper-polished AI-generated concepts to client review meetings or engineering syncs,
The clients would look at the gorgeous rendering and ask, why is this armrest articulated at this specific angle? What is the functional rationale?
and the designers had no answer
Yeah.
because they hadn't gone through the rigorous cognitive process of actually designing it.
The AI just drew it.
Wow. So what was the consequence of that?
A brutal injection of organizational friction. Herman Miller had to implement mandatory time-consuming review protocols retroactively.
Just to deal with the AI outputs.
Yes. Designers were forced to reverse engineer their own AI-generated concepts. They had to spend hours documenting the theoretical ergonomic rationale for choices they didn't actually make.
Just so they could defend the concepts in meetings.
Exactly. The tool deployed to accelerate design ultimately created a massive bureaucratic bottleneck.
And the research expands this beyond creative outputs into what they call process slop.
Process slop, yes.
This is where the implications become legitimately frightening for corporate governance. They look at this through the lens of internal auditing and compliance.
Auditing is an industry built entirely on the foundation of rigorous verification and trust.
Right.
The value of an audit is not the document itself. The value is the institutional confidence that a highly trained human being thoroughly investigated the financial realities of the firm.
So what happens when a junior auditor feeds a massive ledger into an AI and asks it to generate the quarterly variance report?
The AI can do it in 10 seconds. It will pattern match the layout of last quarter's report and spit out something that looks incredibly official.
But the stakeholders reading that report, the board of directors, the SEC regulators, they are acutely aware that these models are prone to hallucinating numbers.
And missing subtle, context-heavy anomalies that indicate fraud.
Right.
So the moment stakeholders suspect a report was heavily generated by AI without deep human engagement, the trust in that document simply evaporates.
And once the trust is gone, the document is worthless.
Worse than worthless, because now you have to audit the audit.
Oh, why?
To rebuild that trust, the firm has to assign senior partners to manually re-verify the AI's findings against the raw data. They have to triple-check the work.
You have created process slop.
Yes. The initial task was completed technically faster, but the organizational value was destroyed, and the remediation takes longer than if the junior auditor had just done the work manually.
Which brings up a deeper, almost existential anxiety that I hear from a lot of people adopting this tech. And the paper actually quantifies it.
The cognitive atrophy.
Yeah. If we are constantly offloading our analytical synthesis to an AI, if the machine is doing the summarizing, the ideation, the variance reporting, are we fundamentally degrading our own cognitive capabilities?
The empirical evidence suggests that is a very real threat.
It is.
Yes. The research cites a really compelling study that looked at student populations.
Okay.
They tracked students who used GenAI extensively as a crutch for essay writing and complex assignments, and they compared them to a control group that used it very selectively or not at all.
And I'm assuming the heavy AI users performed worse later on?
Significantly worse.
Wow.
When both groups were later subjected to assessments that strictly prohibited AI assistance, the heavy AI users demonstrated a measurable deterioration in their critical thinking and independent analytical skills.
Because they hadn't been practicing.
Exactly. They had offloaded the difficult, messy cognitive process of structuring an argument and synthesizing disparate facts. And as a result, those neural pathways weakened.
It's exactly like relying entirely on GPS navigation.
Oh, that's a perfect comparison.
Right. Like when you first move to a new city, if you use GPS every single time you drive to the grocery store, you never build a mental map of the neighborhoods.
Never.
6 months later, if your phone dies, you are completely lost, even though you've driven the route 50 times.
Because the machine did the routing, so your brain didn't bother to store the spatial data.
The research refers to this as the productivity illusion. Right.
Yes. The productivity illusion is the false belief that you possess a capability simply because you can easily produce the output associated with that capability.
Right. You believe you are an expert financial analyst because you can prompt an AI to generate a beautiful financial model.
But the capability resides entirely in the latent space of the neural network, not in your own mind.
The Accenture case study in the paper is a perfect high-stakes demonstration of this illusion breaking down in real time.
Oh, the Accenture study is brutal.
We are talking about highly compensated management consultants here. These are people whose entire professional identity is tied to their ability to synthesize complex data and provide strategic advice to Fortune 500 executives.
And according to the research, Accenture found that their consultants were leaning heavily on AI to perform initial client analyses and draft strategic recommendations.
Okay, so upstream, back at the hotel room, the apparent productivity was incredible.
Right. They were generating comprehensive slide decks in record time.
But consulting isn't just about emailing a slide deck. The real job happens in the boardroom during live client workshops.
Exactly. And that is where the illusion shattered.
What happened?
During these live sessions, client executives would inevitably ask probing left-field questions. They would challenge the underlying assumptions of the data.
Sure, that's what clients do.
Right. Or they'd ask how the strategy would need to pivot if a specific macroeconomic variable changed.
And the consultants who had relied on the AI to do the synthesis, they froze.
They completely froze
Oh.
because they hadn't wrestled with the data.
Yeah.
When you do manual analysis, you go down dead ends, you see the weird anomalies in the spreadsheet, you slowly build a mental scaffolding of the client's business.
You understand the why and the how.
But the AI users only possessed the what. And because they lacked that deep internalized understanding, they were incapable of pivoting dynamically in a live, high-pressure conversation.
That is a terrifying position for a consultant to be in.
Career ending, potentially.
So how did Accenture handle it? Did they just ban the technology?
No, because the efficiency gains in data processing are just too valuable to abandon.
Right.
Instead, they had to mandate a cultural and operational shift. They instituted guidelines emphasizing that GenAI must be utilized as a complementary tool for challenging established thinking.
Not a substitute for foundational analysis.
Exactly. They essentially mandated that consultants must build the cognitive scaffolding manually first and only bring the AI in afterward to look for blind spots or format the final output.
You basically have to earn the right to use the shortcut by proving, the long way.
Yes, that's a great way to put it.
So let's synthesize the reality of the modern office based on this first half of the research.
It's a bit grim.
It is. You have executives buying massive enterprise licenses, expecting a 10x output boom. Instead, they get localized time savings that evaporate into Parkinson's law.
Yep.
They get a tidal wave of downstream work slop that degrades customer trust. They get process slop that forces double verification. And they have a workforce that is slowly losing its ability to think critically in live environments.
It's a perfect storm.
Trying to manage and measure performance in that chaotic environment must be driving leadership completely crazy.
It is resulting in massive capital misallocation and profound organizational friction.
The Gartner data puts a hard number on this failure, doesn't it?
Yes. They reported that 70% of enterprise GenAI pilots fail to progress to production.
The 70%.
Yes. You do not see a failure rate that catastrophic unless there is a fundamental architectural mismatch between what the technology does and how the organization operates.
What's fascinating here is how the research explains that failure rate through the lens of scaling friction.
Scaling friction, yes. It argues that the fundamental error is treating the organization as merely a collection of isolated individuals.
Okay, unpack that for me.
Well, if you have 100 employees and you make each of them 10% faster at their individual typing tasks, management naturally assumes the organization is now 10% more productive.
Right, it seems like simple math.
But organizations are not collections of independent contractors. They are webs of deep interdependencies.
Work does not happen in isolation.
Exactly. A piece of code written by developer A must be reviewed by developer B. It has to be integrated with the database managed by engineer C and approved by security officer D.
So when you introduce a highly variable, probabilistic tool like an AI into only certain nodes of that
And
network,
dramatically increase the transaction costs between those nodes.
there's a study in the paper that perfectly illustrates this, looking at heterogeneous technology adoption.
Yes. They looked at teams where adoption was mixed.
Like, say, 3 people on a 7-person team become AI power users, and the other 4 refuse to use it out of skepticism or lack of training.
The result of that dynamic is catastrophic coordination chaos.
Really? Why?
Because the team no longer shares a baseline velocity or a standardized definition of quality. The power users are generating massive volumes of code or text, and they're tossing it over the fence to the non-users, who are suddenly overwhelmed by the sheer volume of output they are expected to review.
It's like an API rate limit analogy. The AI users are pinging the human reviewers with data requests at a frequency the human API simply cannot handle.
That is exactly what happens. So the team is actually forced to halt real productive work to engage in grueling negotiations about new operational norms.
They have to sit in meetings for hours arguing about protocols.
Yes. Are we allowed to use AI for client-facing code? Who is legally responsible if the AI hallucinates a vulnerable software dependency? Do we require watermarks on AI-generated text?
And none of those meetings produce any value for the customer.
Zero.
It is 100% invisible overhead. It's organizational tech debt.
And while the teams are drowning in this new friction, the executives are looking at their software utilization dashboards and wondering why revenue hasn't spiked.
Which brings us to the deeply human cost of this disconnect, which is measurement anxiety.
This is a crucial sociological component of the paper.
When leadership fundamentally misunderstands how AI impacts workflows, they tend to overcompensate, right?
Yes, by implementing draconian granular tracking metrics. They deploy algorithmic management software to measure keystrokes, application active time, task completion rates.
I want to focus on this for everyone listening, because if you are an employee subjected to this, the psychological toll is immense.
It's awful.
The research shows that when you subject knowledge workers to hyper-granular productivity tracking, especially when they are pressured to demonstrate the mythical AI efficiency that leadership promised the board, it completely devastates their sense of autonomy.
It reduces a highly skilled knowledge worker to a biological component on a digital assembly line.
And from a systems perspective, it inevitably triggers toxic strategic behavior.
Think about it. If an employee is given an AI tool and told their new KPI requires them to process 30% more customer tickets per hour,
Okay.
but the employee knows the AI frequently hallucinates bad advice that they have to manually fix, what is their rational response to that metric?
They game the system to survive.
Exactly.
They stop caring about the actual customer outcome. They rush the manual fix. They submit subpar, generic workslop just to close the ticket in under 3 minutes.
Or they unnecessarily use the AI on simple tasks just to ensure their AI utilization score looks good for their manager.
The metric becomes the mission.
Forcing workers to demonstrate a mathematically impossible level of AI-enabled productivity incentivizes them to destroy the quality of their own work.
So, to summarize the crisis, generic AI deployment creates workslop. It atrophies human intellect. It fractures team coordination with scaling friction. And it drives workers to game metrics out of sheer anxiety.
The diagnosis is incredibly bleak.
But the research doesn't stop there.
Thankfully.
The entire second half of this paper is dedicated to the architectural solution. How do organizations actually fix this mess?
The paper outlines a comprehensive 4-pillar framework for capturing realized value.
Okay, let's go through the pillars.
It starts by completely dismantling how corporations currently approach AI education. The first pillar is context-specific segmented training.
Which basically means the end of the mandatory company-wide webinar.
Please, yes.
Because anyone who has worked in a mid to large company in the last 2 years knows exactly what I'm talking about.
Oh, we all do.
IT sends out a calendar invite for a 45-minute Zoom call called Welcome to Copilot, or Mastering ChatGPT.
Right.
A very tired IT manager spends 20 minutes explaining how to log in, shows a slide with 3 generic prompt examples like, write a poem about our Q3 earnings.
Yes, it's always a poem.
Tells everyone not to paste sensitive PII into the chat box, and then wishes everyone luck.
It is change management theater. It checks a compliance box for HR, but it achieves absolutely nothing in terms of operational capability.
The research explains why this unified approach fails so spectacularly.
Yes. They identified that true organizational AI literacy requires 2 distinct layers: technical understanding and contextual competence.
Okay, so technical understanding is the generic stuff. Understanding that an LLM is a probabilistic next token predictor, not a database of facts. Understanding context windows.
Correct. That part can be taught in a webinar.
Right.
But contextual competence is the realization that AI is not a monolith. The application of the technology changes radically depending on the specific regulatory constraints, the quality standards, and the vocabulary of a particular business domain.
You cannot teach contextual competence in a generalized setting.
No. You have to teach AI for the specific job the person does.
But wait, let me push back here.
Okay.
If you hyper-segment the training, if you teach the marketing team to use AI one way and the engineering team to use it a completely different way, don't you just exacerbate the coordination chaos we talked about earlier?
It's a valid concern, but
Aren't you just building deeper organizational silos where the departments don't even share a baseline understanding of the tools?
the paper argues the exact opposite, actually.
Really? How so?
By providing highly specific, domain-relevant training, you are establishing a localized baseline of quality that prevents the generation of process slop.
Oh, I see.
If marketing is using AI correctly for their specific needs, their output is higher quality when it hands off to sales. The Bosch case study in the research is a masterclass in how to execute this segmentation effectively.
Bosch. They are a massive, highly complex German engineering and technology multinational.
Exactly. You can't just give a generic prompt guide to a company that builds both automotive fuel injectors and enterprise software.
All right, that would be useless.
So Bosch completely abandoned the unified training model. They constructed distinct, function-specific curricula.
Okay.
They took their engineering teams and provided intense training focused strictly on how to leverage AI to optimize CAD designs, enhance thermodynamic simulations, and structure technical documentation.
And I assume the procurement team didn't hear a single word about thermodynamics.
Not a single word. The procurement curriculum was entirely isolated to their specific domain.
Which would be what?
Using AI to analyze complex, multi-language supplier contracts, identify supply chain vulnerabilities based on global news feeds, and draft initial vendor negotiation strategies.
The results of this segmented approach are staggering.
Yeah.
The paper notes that by contextualizing the training, adoption rates within those specific functions skyrocketed past 60%.
Yes, because when they were running the generic corporate training, sustainable adoption was hovering under 20%.
Wow, under 20.
Because the generic training asked the employee to do the cognitive heavy lifting of translating a theoretical tool into a practical workflow.
While the segmented training did that translation for them.
Exactly. It handed them a tool that solved a problem they were actively experiencing that exact afternoon.
And Bosch paired this domain-specific training with a concept the research calls progressive skill development, specifically focusing on building high-confidence pathways.
Yes.
How does that work in practice?
It's essentially a risk mitigation strategy. You do not train a procurement officer and then immediately instruct them to use an AI to autonomously draft a legally binding $50 million component contract on day one.
Obviously not. The risk of hallucination is too high.
And if it fails, the employee will permanently lose trust in the system.
Right. So instead, you build a high-confidence pathway. You start them on the bunny hill.
Exactly. You assign them low-risk, internally facing tasks where the AI is statistically highly reliable.
Like what?
Like summarizing an internal meeting transcript or extracting key dates from an existing contract.
Tasks where a mistake isn't catastrophic.
Right. You let them use the tool in an environment where a hallucination is easily caught and causes no financial damage.
And as they build an intuitive understanding of the model's failure modes, you progressively escalate their clearance to utilize AI on higher stakes, judgment-heavy tasks.
Exactly.
Okay, so Pillar 1 gives us a workforce that is segmented, domain-trained, and operating with appropriate caution.
Yes.
But as I think about how large organizations actually function, an incredibly well-trained employee is still fundamentally constrained by the architecture of their workflow.
Absolutely.
If you put a Formula One driver in a horse-drawn carriage, they still aren't going on the highway.
That is very true.
This leads directly to the second pillar of the framework, which I personally believe is the most critical paradigm-shifting insight in the entire paper.
End-to-end process redesign.
Yes.
It is the absolute core of the realization of value. If an executive takes away only one lesson from this deep dive, it must be this.
Stop trying to make a flawed process faster.
Yes. The greatest mistake organizations make with generative AI is utilizing it to accelerate a flawed legacy process rather than utilizing it to reimagine the process entirely.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the paper explicitly connects this to classical business process reengineering.
Citing the foundational work from the 90s, yeah.
The concept is that you cannot just bolt new technology onto an old org chart. You have to aggressively decompose the existing workflows down to their atomic components.
You have to map the actual journey of the work. You break the process down and then you rebuild it from scratch, consciously allocating tasks based on comparative advantage.
Assigning tasks to the AI that the AI is actually good at.
Like rapid semantic search, pattern recognition, and initial drafting.
And then you assign tasks to the human that require empathy, ethical judgment, and complex physical world context.
The Klarna case study in the text is the ultimate example of this.
Okay, let's dive into Klarna. They're a massive Swedish fintech company handling millions of consumer transactions.
Their customer service workflow, prior to AI, was essentially the same as any large corporation.
A customer emails a complaint, it sits in a queue.
A human agent opens it, reads it, accesses 3 different databases to find the account info, types up a response, and hits send.
The legacy mindset, the faster horse mindset, would be to just give those human agents a co-pilot integration so they could type their email responses 15 seconds faster.
Which, as we discussed earlier, would result in minor apparent productivity gains.
But it would ultimately hit a hard ceiling.
Yeah.
Because the human bottleneck, the reading, the context switching, the manual routing remains exactly the same.
Right. But Klarna didn't do that. They didn't bolt a chatbot onto the side of a broken system.
What did they do?
They paused operations and mapped the entire end-to-end customer inquiry flow. They categorized every single type of incoming data. Then they architected a completely new routing system. They identified massive swaths of inquiries, checking a balance, requesting a refund status, updating an address where an AI agent could fully resolve the issue from start to finish without a human ever seeing it.
That is full automation of deterministic tasks.
Yes, but they didn't stop there. They identified the crucial middle ground inquiries that require AI-human collaboration.
How did that work?
For a moderately complex issue, the system architecture dictates that the AI receives the email, pulls the customer's entire financial history, identifies the likely point of friction,
Okay.
Drafts a highly detailed preliminary brief, and then executes a specific structured handoff to a human agent for final judgment and communication.
And finally, they identified the highly sensitive, complex escalations,
Like fraud alerts or severe financial distress.
where the system is designed to bypass the AI entirely and route immediately to a specialized human crisis team.
The outcome of this structural redesign is breathtaking. Klarna reported that their average customer resolution time dropped by 2.5 hours.
2.5 hours. But the key distinction for our listeners is why it dropped.
Exactly.
It did not drop because an individual customer service rep suddenly learned how to type 2.5 hours faster using a clever prompt.
No, it dropped because the structural architecture of the work was fundamentally reimagined.
The AI wasn't just assisting the workflow, it became the routing infrastructure of the workflow.
And this structural shift unlocks true realized productivity because it elevates the human capital.
The Klarna agents were no longer wasting their cognitive energy copy-pasting tracking numbers.
They were entirely focused on handling complex emotional or financial escalations that actually demand human empathy and nuanced problem solving.
But redesigning a process within a single department, like customer service, is only the beginning.
Right, that's just the start.
The paper argues that the most explosive potential for AI lies in crossing functional boundaries.
The Thomson Reuters case study illustrates this cross-functional integration beautifully.
Thomson Reuters is a global information conglomerate. They have massive legal research divisions, and they have massive global news divisions.
Historically, those two departments operate in complete silos. A corporate structure usually says the legal team gets a legal AI and the journalism team gets a journalism AI.
But Thomson Reuters built a unified system.
Yes, they developed AI capabilities that continuously ingest and monitor real-time court filings, judicial rulings, and legislative updates.
And the primary function of this system is to assist their legal researchers in identifying precedent and updating their legal databases, right?
That's the main function, yes. However, because they redesigned the process holistically, they programmed that exact same system to simultaneously evaluate those legal filings for broader public interest.
This is so smart.
When the AI detects a court ruling with significant corporate or political implications, it instantly translates the dense legal jargon into a clear summary and flags it directly to the breaking news journalism desks.
It is acting as a semantic translator between two distinct corporate cultures.
Exactly. A dry 400-page appellate court ruling is just another Tuesday for the legal department, but it's a front-page headline for the news department.
The AI bridges that gap instantly. It removes the friction of human interdepartmental handoffs.
It proves that generative AI's most profound organizational capability might not be deep, isolated computation, but rather its unparalleled ability to translate context and connect historically siloed data sets across an enterprise.
I completely agree with the vision, but let me play the skeptic again.
Please do.
We have just designed these massive end-to-end automated workflows. We have AIs routing customer service tickets and flagging legal documents to journalists.
Right.
If we heavily rely on this infrastructure, how do we prevent the workslop and the hallucinations we talked about earlier from fatally infecting this beautiful new system?
It's a huge risk.
Right. If the Thomson Reuters AI hallucinates the outcome of a Supreme Court case and sends it directly to a journalist who publishes it, the reputational damage is catastrophic.
Which is exactly why the third pillar of the framework is non-negotiable. Institutionalized quality governance.
You cannot rely on the ad hoc diligence of individual employees.
You cannot just hope that the journalist remembers to double-check the AI's summary.
You have to build the friction back into the system on purpose.
Exactly. You must design structured, human-in-the-loop review protocols that are strictly calibrated to the risk profile of the specific task.
It is a sliding scale of governance.
Yes. If an internal AI generates a summary of the weekly IT maintenance schedule, the risk is near zero. It requires virtually no human review.
But if an AI generates an external-facing earnings report or clinical medical record,
the architecture must mandate heavy, multi-stage human verification.
the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center case study is the ultimate test of this.
MSK. Yes.
We're talking about oncology. The stakes literally do not get higher. A hallucinated dosage or a missed symptom in a medical record can result in a fatality.
You cannot have process slop in a cancer ward.
Exactly. But MSK recognized the massive potential of AI to reduce physician burnout.
Doctors spend hours every day typing clinical notes into electronic health record systems instead of looking at patients.
So MSK deployed AI systems to passively listen to the doctor-patient interaction and automatically transcribe and structure that unstructured dialogue into a formal clinical note.
Upstream, apparent productivity is solved. The note is drafted instantly.
But they didn't just pipe that draft directly into the permanent medical record, obviously.
Absolutely not. They engineered a highly sophisticated, human-in-the-loop user interface.
How do they do it?
Generative models operate on probabilities, right? They calculate the likelihood of the next word.
Okay.
MSK system captures those underlying probability scores, the log probs. When the AI generates the draft note, it maps those confidence scores to a visual heat map in the physician's review dashboard.
Oh, that is brilliant.
The system explicitly highlights the specific sentences or medical terms where the AI's internal confidence score falls below a certain threshold.
It visually directs the physician.
Essentially saying, I am 99% sure about the blood pressure reading, but I am only 60% sure I correctly understood the specific name of this new targeted therapy the patient mentioned. Look closely here.
That prevents alert fatigue. If the system highlights everything, the doctor ignores it.
Exactly. By only highlighting the low confidence data, it directs the highly expensive, highly trained human attention exactly to the point of maximum risk.
And crucially, the architecture dictates that the physician must explicitly approve and sign off on the note before it is committed to the permanent database.
The systemic friction is intentionally maintained at the point of critical liability.
This allows MSK to drastically reduce the total time physicians spend doing raw data entry, while mathematically preserving the highest possible standard of medical documentation.
It's a perfect governance model.
Okay, so if an organization executes these first three pillars, they segment their training, they fundamentally redesign their workflows like Klarna, and they institute rigorous risk-calibrated governance like MSK, they are structurally prepared for the AI era.
Yes, they are.
But that leaves the most difficult operational question. So what does this all mean for the bottom line?
The ROI.
Right. How do we actually know if this massive reorganization is working? Because we already established that tracking individual keystrokes or task times just creates anxiety and gaming behavior.
Which brings us to the fourth pillar. Measuring what actually matters.
Okay.
Organizations must abandon intermediate activity metrics, like measuring how many prompts an employee ran or how many words the AI generated per hour.
Instead, they need to implement controlled, value-focused implementation experiments.
Yes. The Boston Consulting Group internal study cited in the paper completely shattered my preconceived notions about how to measure AI productivity.
Let's dive deep into this methodology. BCG wanted to rigorously test if giving their consultants access to GPT-4 actually improved their performance.
But they didn't just hand it out and look at an aggregate dashboard. They structured a genuine, scientifically controlled experiment within their own workforce.
What did the setup look like?
They took hundreds of consultants and matched them into pairs based on experience and historical performance. They assigned both groups a standardized, complex consulting task.
Like analyzing a hypothetical company's performance, identifying strategic growth avenues, and drafting a comprehensive client presentation.
Exactly. One group was given full access to GPT-4 and training on how to use it. The control group had no AI access and worked using traditional research methods.
And they tracked everything.
Every metric, the time taken for individual microtasks, the total time to project completion, and crucially, the final quality of the work as blindly graded by senior BCG partners who did not know which team produced which deck.
Okay, let me pause you here because I want to guess the outcome, and I want the listener to guess the outcome based on everything we know so far.
Let's hear it.
We know from the writing study earlier that AI makes tasks 37% faster. So my logical assumption would be that the AI-enabled BCG team finished the entire client project in roughly half the time of the control group. But maybe, because it's generated by AI, the senior partners rated the strategic quality slightly lower because it lacked that bespoke human touch.
That is exactly the intuitive assumption that most executives make. But the empirical reality of the study inverted both of your guesses.
Really? Both of them?
First, let's look at the timeline. The AI-enabled team did not finish the project earlier.
Wait, they didn't finish faster?
They took the exact same total amount of time from start to finish as the control group.
But how is that possible? Where did the massive time savings on drafting and researching go?
Well, if you were a manager only tracking time to finish a slide, you would have seen massive apparent productivity in the first few hours. The AI team crushed the initial research phase.
But they didn't clock out early.
No. They reinvested the saved time. They absorbed the efficiency into analytical depth. They use the saved hours to run more complex financial scenarios, to pressure test their strategic assumptions more rigorously, and to refine the nuance of their client communication.
The AI didn't shrink the container of the project. It radically increased the density of the value packed inside that container.
Precisely. Which leads to the second half of your guess.
Because they reinvested that time into deep human synthesis, the senior partners graded the final output of the AI-enabled team significantly higher in quality than the control group.
Yes. This completely rewires the concept of ROI.
If a company strictly measures ROI by looking for reductions in total labor hours, they will look at that BCG study and conclude that AI is a failure because the project took just as long.
They completely miss the fact that the actual value delivered to the client, the strategic insight, was vastly superior.
Real measurement requires value-focused metrics.
Did customer retention increase? Did the defect rate in our code drop? Did the client accept our strategic proposal? Organizations have to measure the outcome, not the output.
And alongside outcome measurement, the research emphasizes the necessity of total cost accounting.
Right, because this technology isn't free, we often talk about the time saved as if it's pure profit.
It is never pure profit.
Executives must subtract the hidden structural costs. When you calculate the ROI of an AI deployment, you must account for the enterprise licensing fees.
You must calculate the API token costs, which scale exponentially with heavy usage.
You have to subtract the hundreds of hours spent developing and delivering the segmented training curricula.
And most importantly, you must subtract the ongoing labor cost of the humans who are operating your quality governance checkpoints.
The doctors at MSK still have to spend time reading the heat map and verifying the low confidence flags.
Exactly. When you implement rigorous total cost accounting, the net realized productivity gain is almost always a fraction of what the raw task level acceleration implies.
It is a much more sobering financial picture, but it's a necessary honesty.
And that honesty is critical. Because if leadership continues to promise the board a magical 40% reduction in operating costs, they are going to force terrible decisions down the org chart.
Which transitions us perfectly to the final internal hurdle, culture.
Right. How do you build an organizational culture capable of sustaining this kind of continuous structural redesign over the next decade?
It begins at the absolute top of the hierarchy, with a radical shift in executive communication. The paper argues that leaders must stop standing on stages and promising immediate, frictionless optimization.
They must reframe the entire AI initiative around the concept of exploration over optimization.
I love that phrasing so much. Exploration over optimization.
If a CEO promises the staff that this new tool will make their jobs 30% easier by Friday, the CEO is going to lose all credibility by Monday when the API goes down.
Or the model hallucinates a critical piece of code.
Or the new Klarna-style routing system accidentally misroutes a VIT client.
Candid acknowledgement of the technology's limitations and its probabilistic nature is the only way to build systemic trust.
But beyond managing expectations, organizations have to fundamentally rethink the origin of innovation.
Historically, enterprise software is deployed top-down. The C-suite buys a massive package and IT forces it down onto the frontline workers.
But the C-suite doesn't actually know how the work gets done. The CEO doesn't know what it's like to operate the supply chain logistics dashboard at 3 or 0 a.m. on a Tuesday.
They only see the abstracted metrics.
Which is why the paper champions bottom-up innovation, or worker agency, as the most reliable engine for discovering high-value AI use cases.
The C-suite cannot mandate contextual competence. The Unilever case study highlights the power of this approach.
Unilever operates massive global manufacturing facilities. They didn't just have IT push an AI model to the factory floor with a generic instruction to be more efficient.
No, they actually asked the people turning the wrenches.
They invited the frontline production workers, the maintenance technicians, and the shift supervisors to identify the specific, recurring pain points in their daily physical routines where computational pattern matching might help.
And I guarantee the workers suggested things the executive board would never have dreamed of.
Absolutely. The frontline workers suggested utilizing machine learning models to analyze the acoustic and vibration sensor data from the manufacturing equipment.
To predict mechanical failures before they caused a line stoppage.
They suggested AI integrations for dynamic shift scheduling based on real-time fluctuations in supply chain deliveries.
The Cleveland Clinic utilized the exact same philosophy, didn't they?
They did. When designing clinical AI tools, they didn't let software engineers dictate the workflow. They formed interdisciplinary squads of attending physicians, triage nurses, and patient care coordinators to define the exact functional requirements.
Because an engineer might build an AI that perfectly predicts a patient's readmission risk, but the doctor knows that a raw percentage score is useless in a clinical setting.
Right. The doctor needs the AI to provide a transparent, understandable rationale for that score, so the doctor can actually explain the treatment plan to a terrified patient and their family.
The human element dictates the technical requirement.
But this democratic, bottom-up approach introduces a massive governance paradox.
This raises an important question. If you empower every factory floor, every local marketing team, and every regional office to invent their own bespoke AI solutions, don't you inevitably slide right back into the coordination chaos we talked about earlier?
You end up with the ultimate nightmare of shadow IT.
Exactly. You have 100 different unvetted, unsecure AI applications running wildly across the enterprise, leaking proprietary data into public models.
You need the innovation of the edge, but you need the security of the center.
The Maersk case study provides the architectural blueprint for solving this paradox through what the research calls a federated innovation model.
Maersk is one of the largest shipping and logistics conglomerates on the planet. Their operations are unbelievably complex, spanning hundreds of different regulatory environments and local markets.
They realized that a centralized IT team in Copenhagen could never move fast enough to build highly contextualized AI tools for every local port authority in the world.
But they also couldn't allow regional teams to just start plugging random open-source AI models into their core logistics databases.
So they instituted a system of bounded autonomy.
Yes.
The Central AI Governance Council at headquarters maintains absolute authority over the foundational guardrails.
They define the strict data security protocols, they manage the enterprise API keys, they ensure compliance with international privacy laws, and they establish the mandatory human-in-the-loop review standards that all applications must meet.
They build a highly secure, heavily monitored digital sandbox.
But they do not dictate what gets built inside the sandbox.
Precisely. The regional operational teams are given the resources, the training, and the authority to develop specific AI applications tailored entirely to their local realities, as long as they operate within the central guardrails.
So the Maersk team operating in Asian ports builds an AI predictive model focused entirely on anticipating localized port congestion and weather delays, because that is their primary operational friction.
Meanwhile, the Maersk team in Europe focuses their resources on building an AI application to automate the translation and processing of incredibly complex EU cross-border customs documentation.
It is the perfect structural compromise: centralized security and standardized quality governance, combined with decentralized, hyper-relevant, worker-driven innovation.
Okay, as we start to pull the lens back even further, we have spent this entire deep dive looking inside the walls of a single organization.
True.
But businesses do not exist in a vacuum. As every company, from a behemoth like Maersk down to a local regional law firm, develops these internal AI capabilities, redesigns their workflows, and unleashes these AI agents, they are eventually going to have to interact with each other.
And this is the final macro-level frontier that the research explores: the ecosystem.
Because the friction we described internally, the workslop, the heterogeneous adoption, the breakdown of trust, is about to explode on an interorganizational scale.
What happens when your highly governed, finely tuned AI system starts automatically communicating with your vendor's poorly governed, hallucination-prone AI system?
Oh man, we talked about internal process slop, but systemic interorganizational process slop is a terrifying concept.
Imagine my company's AI procurement agent automatically sends an invoice request to your company's AI billing agent.
Okay.
Your AI hallucinates a 20% bulk discount that we never agreed to, and it alters the invoice.
Oh no.
My AI receives the altered invoice, fails to recognize the hallucination because it falls within a pre-approved variance parameter, and auto-approves the payment.
Millions of dollars could be misallocated across the supply chain in microseconds without a single human being aware it happened.
The necessity of establishing interorganizational trust protocols is going to become the defining B2B challenge of the late 2020s. We're going to require industry-wide standards that currently do not exist.
What does that actually look like in practice? Are we talking about digital watermarks?
Yes, cryptographic transparency mechanisms. When a document, a piece of code, or an API request crosses a corporate boundary, it must carry a standardized metadata tag indicating its provenance.
Was this generated by an AI? Which model? And most importantly, what level of human review did it receive before it was transmitted?
If an auditor from firm A is reviewing the financial ledgers of company B, the auditor needs a universally recognized, standardized protocol to verify the integrity of the data they are ingesting.
It is exactly like the early days of the internet, where we had to invent SSL protocols so different networks could securely trust each other's data packets.
We have to invent the HTTPS of artificial intelligence.
And the research makes a vital point that this collaborative capability development is especially critical for small and medium-sized enterprises.
A 50-person specialized manufacturing firm does not have the capital to hire a team of machine learning engineers to build a bespoke federated governance architecture from scratch.
They will be entirely reliant on industry consortia, trade associations, and standardized vendor platforms to provide the templates and the shared training resources.
It requires a collective ecosystem-wide response. The productivity of the entire global supply chain is only as strong as its most hallucination-prone link.
We have covered an immense, complex landscape today. Let's synthesize the core journey of this research.
The overarching, inescapable conclusion from Dr. Westover's work is that generative AI is not a plug-and-play productivity wand.
The macroeconomic data proves conclusively that treating it as a localized task accelerator is a failed strategy.
The path to capturing realized, systemic economic value demands a comprehensive, structural redesign of how work is executed.
The four foundational pillars we must rely on are: first, segmented, role-specific training that prioritizes contextual competence and builds high-confidence pathways.
Second, end-to-end workflow redesign, deconstructing legacy processes and rebuilding them around AI's capacity for rapid routing and cross-functional translation, exactly as Klarna and Thomson Reuters demonstrated.
Third, institutionalized, risk-calibrated quality governance, keeping the human in the loop at the exact point of critical liability to prevent workslop, like the architecture at Memorial Sloan Kettering.
And fourth, utilizing value-focused measurement while fostering bottom-up federated innovation, empowering the frontline workers to solve actual problems within a secure central framework like Maersk.
It is an architectural journey that will be measured in years and decades, not quarters.
The organizations that possess the discipline to undertake this difficult structural work are the only ones who will ultimately capture the multi-trillion-dollar value that the early hype promised.
Absolutely.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, something that builds on everything we've just discussed, but perhaps pushes the implications one step further into the future.
Okay, let's hear it.
We spent this entire time talking about how to manage AI, how to redesign our processes to accommodate it, and how to govern the technology so it doesn't degrade the quality of human work.
Right.
But maybe the true long-term impact of generative AI isn't about figuring out how to do our current jobs faster at all.
That is a profound shift in perspective.
Think about it systemically. If AI continues to scale and it eventually fully automates all of the routine information processing that we currently consider to be the bulk of white-collar knowledge work, the summarizing, the initial drafting, the data formatting, the basic coding, perhaps its greatest societal contribution will not be economic efficiency. Perhaps its greatest contribution will be forcing us to completely and permanently redefine what makes human labor valuable in the first place.
We will be forced to identify the uniquely human delta.
Exactly. When the neural network can synthesize a perfectly accurate, beautifully formatted 50-page strategic analysis in 3 seconds for fractions of a cent, what are you, the human being, actually bringing to the table?
That's the question.
Will the future economy continue to reward sheer processing speed and memory recall? Or will it truly reward empathy, lived physical experience, the ability to build genuine emotional trust in a room, and the courage to make intuitive leaps of logic that no statistically bound algorithm would ever risk taking?
It suggests that the future of work is not about becoming more machine-like in our efficiency, but about elevating the deeply unautomatable aspects of our own humanity.
It does. We started this deep dive talking about the folly of handing out chainsaws to carpenters without a blueprint. Maybe the ultimate realization isn't just learning how to use the chainsaw safely to cut the exact same old wood to build the exact same old houses.
Maybe it's realizing that now that the cutting is effortless, we can finally stop acting like mere lumberjacks and start becoming true architects.
Exactly. I want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Tomorrow, when you sit at your desk and open up your workflow, I encourage you to look at it not with the question, how can AI do this faster, but rather, why do we do it this way at all?